Look, I want to start by thanking Eowyn and Joanna for taking over the Oxfordshire rig. It's been a pleasure to have been the convener for a number of years with a bit of a furlough going on in the last couple, but I'm really pleased that Joanna and Eowyn have taken over. I'm delighted to have been asked to come and give the first talk. And what a time to be doing it. So today's session is going to be about homeschooling or meeting the needs of EAL learners while schools are closed during the global pandemic, and also looking a little bit towards the end about our response to the expectation that teachers and schools will provide replacement grades for students who are unable to take their GCSEs and A Levels and other exams this year. So I'm going to start off with a tweet that I found online the other day, because this really, I think, puts things into context a little bit. This guy is somebody who did a doctorate in the history of education. And he says, throwing around my doctorate in education for a sec, I want all you parents to know that literally no human beings ever in history have been asked to educate kids and do adult work simultaneously the way you are now. The scientific term for what you're facing is batshit insane. And I think that's absolutely right. I think that we all need to be giving ourselves a pat on the back, because we are working against all odds to continue some form of continuity in the education of our nation's children. And teachers like you and the parents at home supporting the education of their children in the best way they can is humbling, quite frankly. It's an amazing job that's being done in very trying circumstances. But while this tweet was aimed at parents, I think something similar can be said about teachers. And teachers likewise. In the history of teaching, you have never been asked, with 4 days' notice, no training and no centralised infrastructure, to completely reimagine how you meet the educational needs of the nation's children. I think it's quite incredible that, as I say, on the Monday, schools were notified that they would probably be closed by the Friday. And in that time, they managed to take their entire curriculum, all of their classroom practice, and put it online and put in place support for children while they were away from school. I think it's incredible. I think you've done a brilliant job so far, and more power to your elbows. It's really quite impressive what's been going on. But what actually are we doing? Well, I don't think we can call this homeschooling. I don't think it's distance education. I don't think you are convening MOOCs, massive online open courses. These are all well-established ways of working in education, in unconventional ways. What you're doing is crisis teaching. This really is. It's pulling out the stops and working out what to do in a crisis, and you're learning on the job. And you are bloody marvellous for even trying it, in my view. And it's difficult, and so I just want to acknowledge right now that this is hard, and we're all trying our best, and I don't have the solutions. What's happening now online is that people are sharing stuff, and there's an absolute wealth of information out there which will help you to try to make the best of what is obviously a very difficult time. And the purpose of this webinar then is to talk a little bit about the kinds of things that we at NALDIC have seen and which we think might be worth you exploring, and to give you some ideas. Of course, it's not exhaustive, and like I say, I don't have the answers, but hopefully this will give you some inspiration, if you need it, to find ways to meet the needs of our EAL learners who are now stuck at home and not in school where they want to be and where they ought to be. I think that we should consider 3 principles about meeting the needs of EAL learners. The first is, I think we should consider the level of English first, then the content. What I mean by that is that it might not be possible to provide support that perfectly aligns with the curriculum that's going on in the schools that are now shut. I know that from our experience at my house with our children, we are doing what we can to keep an educational sort of diet going, but it's not very well aligned with what's going on in the school. But it's doing what we can cope with as 2 adults, one who's been furloughed and the other who's trying to keep a full-time job going at the same time, working from home. So that means that it's in terms of English, it's giving them appropriate levels of English input rather than necessarily trying to force it into the appropriate content. Although wherever possible, obviously that's the best thing to do. The other principle would be that when delivering content, that differentiation is non-negotiable. if we are trying to approximate something similar to what's going on in schools, then we would expect differentiation to happen for EAL learners in the classroom, and we should all endeavour to try to make differentiation for EALs exist online as well, or in whatever way we're delivering education outside of the school context. And the EAL specialists have a role to play in here in advising and supporting their mainstream teacher colleagues in doing this. And then the parents' primary role, there's a lot of talk about keeping up English and so on and so forth. Now, that might not be possible for many parents, and I think that very definitely the parents' primary role is support through the L1. You know as well as I do that we have good evidence that children who are strong in their L1 also tend to be strong in their L2. Not only that, if your concentration is not, as it should be, is not just on English language, but also content, the content of the foundation subjects and other subjects in the curriculum, then it's as important to make sure that children are continued to be exposed to the learning around the subject. And if that has to be through the L1 or is better delivered through the L1, then that's fabulous. That's absolutely appropriate. So those are three things to bear in mind as we go through this. To begin with, supporting mainstream colleagues who are in various different ways putting lessons online. I think that, as I said, that differentiation for EAL learners should be part of that. It shouldn't take the position that differentiation for different groups within the class is no longer meaningful or appropriate. I think absolutely it is, and perhaps even more so, given that children will be doing this at least semi-independently and will require lots of support and easy ways to understand the things they've been asked to do and to respond to them. And luckily for us, many of the tried and true scaffolds can be easily adapted for online work. For example, using sentence starters to help frame sentences for the children, using mixed up sentences as well, for example. These things that you can print out, send or put online, parents can print out and children can use on their own or with a little bit of help. Concept maps, another good example of something which can be quite straightforwardly given to EAL learners, maybe with the concepts written out. You could that can be cut out and stuck into a Venn diagram, for example. Bilingual word lists is another example of that, and that can be matched with concept maps as well to put the English and the matching the L1 to the English and putting those concepts around the map together. Simplifying your text is also something that you can do, and there are online resources which allow you to put in enter a text and have that simplified. Some of these work better than others, but have a look for those, or simplify the text yourselves if you're sending something through. I also think that that's important with regard to the instructions that come with the learning activity, especially if we think that if we consider that the instructions can often be a little bit more complex than perhaps the language that's being studied. So what to do with the content is really important to make sure that's communicated effectively. Also remembering that you may be asking parents to interpret the instructions for their children, and if the parents' levels of English are not as strong as others, then it would be important to make sure that that is made accessible in whatever way is appropriate. Games also a good one there. We'll go into some of these in a little bit more detail later on. But also clear instructions, as I said, and it might be better to record them via voice or video recording rather than have those as written instructions, so that they can be perhaps better understood. But that's important, I think, for EAL specialists to work with their mainstream colleagues to make sure that there is some provision in what is sent home that takes account for the language learning needs and the English linguistic proficiency of the learners and their parents. The first place that I would recommend that you go and have a look if you're looking for ideas is the EALjournal.org blog site. This is NALDIC's official blog site, and over the past few weeks we've been running regular posts which are designed to give you ideas and to share practices of other teachers around the world, and NALDIC members in particular. So I'm going to give this a quick click and take you to the website. So then if you haven't been there before, do check it out. It's called EALjournal.org. And this, if you go up to the the hamburger menu up here, you'll see a word cloud of the tags around various posts that we have on the blog. And you can see this big tag here, COVID-19. So anything that we've published which has something to do with COVID-19, you can just click on that and it will take you to only those posts. You can see most of them are to do with classroom activities, although there are some others. This is our position statement on calculating replacement grades, and I'll talk about that towards the end of this session. But it's really, like I say, it's really worth checking these out. The dual language ebooks, I'm going to talk about that in more detail later, but let's have a look at an example of an activity suggested by a NALDIC member. This one's from a colleague in Essex, and she's used this, the forms feature of Microsoft Office, but it can also be done through Google Forms, and there's a rather nice way to give a structure to responding to educational tasks. So here you can build a form where questions are posed and there's a space for the kids to write their answers in. All of the answers then get forwarded onto an Excel spreadsheet, and so that gives you a nice document of a record of what the responses the kids have been. As I say, I won't read all of this to you, but you can go and check it out. And this is a quick description of the activity with some examples, and should hopefully give you some inspiration to make something similar for yourself and for your own class. Just while we're here, I'll highlight this, that we are dependent on our members for and the EAL community to help us populate this blog with ideas. So if you have an activity that you would like to share, we really want to hear from you. Post should be no more than 500 words and describe an activity, so that someone can quickly read it and then take the idea and work with it themselves. If you have resources that you'd like to share as well, then that's great. PDF files or Word documents, and we can host them on the website and provide clickable links that will take people through so they can download your resources. Let's have a quick look at some other ones. I want particularly to show you, here we go, the Collaborative Learning Project. Their website is full of fabulous ideas. Again, really quick activities. And here you can see an example of where I've, if we click on this, it'll take you through to the PDF file that goes with this activity. And the rest of the post explains what you're going to need, how to play, gives an example of some of the resources, and so on. And so check this one out, but do go and see the Collaborative Learning website for loads of ideas and quite easy things to self-contained activities that can be downloaded and used with your learners and sent home for parents to have a look at as well. This is an interesting post here, at home low-tech learning activities. Not everybody has access to the internet, and in fact we know that there's a significant intersection between low socioeconomic status and some EAL learners. It may be difficult for them to get online, to find quiet spaces to work and so on. It might be better to be thinking about things that don't require computers, although delivering the content in the first place will obviously require some kind of connection. But here is another good post which gives you some ideas about what you might be able to do at home with your learners without relying on the internet, and so on. So this is I say I could take you through each one of these posts, but I think it would be far better for you to have a look on your own. We've also got on the front, on the home page, the pinned post in the on the website is a crowdsourced list of activities or websites actually that can be used to support learning at home, or crisis teaching as I've redubbed it. We haven't had an opportunity to go and road test every single one of these. This was just earlier in March, late March, I asked the NALDIC community of educators to send me ideas, send me any websites that they thought were good, and we've tried to do a job of classifying them into themes or different types of activity, but it's obviously worth you having a look at these properly before sending them on to kids to make sure that the content is appropriate and that the links work as you expect them to. But here we start off with some interactive websites. from everything from English focused work to more general stuff like Twinkle, which is a good place to get those websites. Those concept maps and word lists and so on that I talked about a moment ago. Nice, easy to print out, and they're offering some reduced price, I think, or free access to some of their resources. So quite a number of them. Here we have the online books, including the Mantralingua one, which I'm going to talk about a bit more. But here we go, 150 online books in 30 different languages, Polish texts, all sorts of stuff, free login there due to COVID-19 and the reading teacher. Lots of online books there, so do check them out. Here we go, there's a section on worksheets, general resources for teachers and parents, flashcards, worksheets, all that kind of stuff. This is EAL resources from the Bell Foundation's excellent there. EAL Nexus site, lots and lots of activities and ideas in there for you to have a look at. And then as we get down towards the end, some more general literacy stuff, some more graphic organisers, videos, YouTube and so on that you can use, a few apps, and there are plenty more obviously, but we've got some ideas here. And then some, right at the bottom here, some stuff about coronavirus, advice about coronavirus in lots of different languages. And so PDF files that you can download to help your multilingual families understand about coronavirus if they need to. Again, this was produced a number of weeks ago, so things may well have changed recently, so it's worth checking out these organisations to see whether they've added more resources. If you have any ideas, if you've got something to contribute to this list, then do let us know. It's very helpful to have a little bit of blurb to go with a link so that we can sort of suggest or say what it is. So like this one, the learningvillage.net, so whoever submitted this idea, so the EAL Learning for Learners in Schools, covers school-specific vocabulary as well as functional English and phonics. Fully image-based, so suitable for learners in any language, and send learners. Assessment embedded, so that gives you a nice idea about what you'll find at this website. So if you've got ideas, please do send them in. And you can email directly through the blog site. Let me just get that back up. By going to actually to the Write for Us section here. So sharing activities, just asking for your post there, and then you can just fill in this form and send it, and that will get emailed to us, and we can add your contribution to the blog. So please do that. Right, so that's that. Now the other, moving on to some other activities. One of the things, as I've said, has been very difficult is for people to manage this, and with the best will in the world, some of the stuff that is going around can be quite overwhelming, particularly if you're not a natural teacher or you've got other things to do like go to work. So we found the BBC Bite Size to be very useful because it's quite intuitive. It's divided up by age phase, so you can see primary, secondary, and post-16 there. And lots of activities which are linked very deliberately to the national curriculum. And there's videos and quizzes and activities that can be done and usually quite independently by the learners. One of the reasons that I think this is quite useful, going back to my point about concentrating on the level of the English before you worried so much about the content, is that themes are repeated year on year. We have, in some of the subject areas, we have what some people call a spiral curriculum, where the same themes or the same general areas are revisited in a upward spiral as they go through the year groups. So, for example, you can see here on the right-hand side, solids, liquids, and gases as part of the Key Stage 3 science curriculum. On the left-hand side there, it's states of matter, which is the same thing, solids, liquids, and gases, but this time for year 4. So depending on the level of your students' English, it might be helpful to send them to the year, if they're in Key Stage 3, is actually to send them to the year 4 resources in order to give them an easier time of the English, make sure the language is necessarily a little bit more simplified for year 4. and so maybe better suited to your EAL learners. Now my pointer's not working, so I can't. There we go. So let's have a look at one of these. So here's the Key Stage 3. Everything's made up of tiny particles. The properties of something. It's nice that they have these keywords and key phrases highlighted. There's a video there. Let's have a quick look at that.
Frozen coconut, and this forms the base of our favourite sauces. What we need to do now is just pop this into the pan, and you can see it starts to melt straight away. Now you can see
There we go.
a block of coconut is melted.
And you can see that I've just put the subtitles on, which can also be quite handy there, so that you can have both the text and the audio. If we compare that to the year 4 one, then again it's about solids, liquids and gases. The same, it still has the keywords highlighted and so on, and there's videos of that. Obviously they're a little bit more age appropriate, which might be a little difficult for some of the learners, but hopefully the easier access to the language might outweigh the fact that it looks a little bit young. But there you've got all of the information that you need, more videos, making it nice and interactive. Here's an interactive activity. So here you're asked to sort these.
Choose the correct state.
Okay, so wood is a solid, syrup is a liquid, steam, well, technically speaking, steam is vapor, but there you go, we'll put it in gas. C, liquid. Pencil, let's have some more liquids. What's a feather? Feather's a solid. Helium's a gas. Air is also a gas. We can check the answers.
Solid, bro. You've identified all the states correctly.
So there you go. And here we've got an activity that can be done with parents and so on and so forth. So that's one way of making sure that we're keeping to the national curriculum, but also the opportunity there to choose from a different year group to the one that your EAL learner is in, so that a more appropriate level of English can be used with those children who are not so proficient. Now, the other resource that does a similar thing is Oakland Academy. Again, I think this is a really, really nice example of how the teaching profession has pulled together in order to provide support for all of our learners while they are away from school. And this was essentially a virtual school set up over the Easter holidays, and they went out and got an army of teachers to provide video lessons and activities that kids can do. Here's another example of where you can use the same theme but from different year groups. So we've got instruction writing, and again instructions here for year 2 and for year 1. So it may be more appropriate to give the year 2 work to, so beg your pardon, give the year 1 work to your year 2 children, if that would be most appropriate in terms of the level of their English language. So let's have a quick look at those. Again, a really nice, intuitive, easy to follow website. You can choose the subject up here, so you can go to the different year groups, and then when you get to the year groups, you'll see what subjects are available for those year groups. It's not complete yet, it's still a work in progress, but there's already quite a lot on here. And we'll have a look at one of these lessons just to get an idea. So you start the lesson. Here we have a video. This one doesn't, I don't think, no, it doesn't have subtitles.
Hi everybody, and welcome to lesson 5. Now I'm really excited about this lesson because we are going to be doing our writing, which we've been working towards all week. So I hope you're feeling...
So that's a quick look at that. Once that's done, then we go to an activity. That one's complete. It was just the video there, but there are others. I wonder whether we can have a look and see another video. Okay, but some of them have clickable quizzes and ways to respond to the work as well, which seem to be very appropriate, multiple choice questions and so on. So here we have the say that was the year 2 instructions lessons, and here we go to the Year 1 instruction lessons. Starts with a video, and that's it for that one. But let's have a quick look at the schedule. If I go to subject, let's say that we're looking at Year 10, English, French, Maths, Science, Spanish and PE. Let's have a quick look at science, photosynthesis. Okay, and this is an example. We start the lesson, the following quiz. It starts with a quiz, what you know already. So identify the subcellular structure responsible for synthesizing proteins. Ooh, that's a bit beyond me, but anyway, you get the idea. They can go through, submit their answers, and then get feedback after that to see how many they got right, which ones and they need to work on again, and so on and so forth. So do take a look at the Oak National Academy again. I think using the principle of differentiation there by language level, and using year group as a proxy for the complexity of the language. Although obviously it won't be as straightforward as that, but that'll give you a good place to start. So that's Oak National Academy. Now this one very worth taking into consideration, because this is something which will allow families to get involved with the work, because it involves the first language. Mantralingua is a company which is well known to NALDIC. It's worth saying here that we're not being sponsored by anybody. I'm not getting any kickbacks for mentioning the organisations that I am. These are ones that we think, or that have stood out to us as being potentially very useful. So the nice thing about Mantra is that they are providing free access until August to their library of 550 bilingual ebooks in 38 languages. The text is presented both English and L1. There's audio of in both languages of the text. They cover folk tales, myths, stories of multicultural life in the UK, reference books, accompanying videos to explain certain things and to talk about how to use the books, advice for parents. And some of them have activities embedded in as well, and I'll show you one or two of those a little bit later. And they're appropriate for ages 3 to 15, although I think it skews towards the primary end more than it does the secondary end. So let's have a look at, I still haven't got my pointer in the right place. There we go. Let's have a look at the demo. So once you've signed up for your free trial, you get this login, and then you are presented with this huge selection of books. It takes a little while to load, but it gets up there eventually. So here we go. You can see multiple versions of the same book, each one in a different language. So let's look at here. Here's the Don't Cry Sly in Albanian and English, Arabic and English, Cantonese, only English, French, German, Punjabi, Polish. What else have we got? Portuguese, Spanish, Tamil, Urdu. So let's have a quick look at one of those. I fancy listening to some Urdu today. So you click on the book, open it up. And once it's loaded, you can start to flick through it like any other ebook. You can see here there are flashcards, so a variety of activities that are included in the back. Flashcards labelling the parts, matching pairs. So we'll have a look at those in a mo. There's obviously the title of the book in both Urdu and English. And here we can listen to the text.
Sly's mum was always shouting, "Tidy your room, do the dishes, brush your teeth, comb your hair." And however much Sly did, it was never enough for his mum.
And then we click on the Urdu text.
चंपती अम्मा हर वक्त डांटती रहती थी, अपना कमरा साफ करो, खाने के बर्तन धो, अपने दांत ब्रश करो, अपने बालों में कंघा करो। और चंपक कितनी भी कोशिश करता, उनके लिए वो काफी न होता।
So there you go. We flip through. And I just want to take you to the end now to have a look at the activities that are available. There we go. So let's have a go at the labelling the parts. Okay, so using the images from the book, we have an opportunity to reinforce some English vocabulary here. So nice and easy drag and drop. If you get it wrong, you can submit. It tells you you've got something wrong. Which two were wrong? Those two. Okay, so we try again. See if we can correctly label the plate and the table. Submit those. And there you go. That is correct. That is correct. Good. So that's a fiction text. Let's have a look at a non-fiction text. So again, these are quite useful and might well be more appropriate for secondary school learners. And that's the key terms series here. So if we take, let's have a go at Lithuanian this time. So the key terms for science, and it's basically a speaking glossary with the meanings of words spoken and written, just spoken, I think, in Lithuanian, yeah, and the other language. So here's the first page. Let's have a listen to what an amphibian is in English.
Amphibian. A group of animals that can live both in water and on land, like frogs.
And then in Lithuanian?
Amphibian, amphibija, varliagyvis. Grupė gyvūnų, kurie gali gyventi tiek sausumoje, tiek vandenyje, kaip pavyzdžiui varlės.
So there you go. And these books are, these key terms books are available for a range of subjects. So I'll just wait for that to reload and so show you. So we've got science, English, geography, maths. And that's your lot. You can see the full extent of the books there. There's an awful lot of them. Loads of different languages. So like I say, so I wasn't aware of these. I just found this one. So how to read with your children. So some advice for parents. This excellent again in both languages. Something to, if you can encourage the parents of your children to sign up to this rather than you sending them the link, because it's all tied to an individual account. But anyone can sign up. Doesn't cost anything. They don't take any credit card details or anything like that. So you can just sign up, enjoy the resource until schools are back open again. And here you go. You've got some information here about how to support your child through reading. So do explore those. A great resource. So this is the website where you can find the information about how to sign up and take advantage of that free offer. Okay, Netflix. I don't know about you, but I've been acquainting myself quite a lot with Netflix over the last few weeks. One of the advantages of Netflix is that you can set up accounts in which you specify your language. So, for example, in our household, one of the people who lives here is a Thai speaker, and so she set up a Thai version of Netflix, which not only brings into her feed Thai language programming, so programs that have been made in Thailand, but also provides Thai subtitles to the English language films, and so that's quite handy as well. But there's also in some of the programs, you've got subtitles and overdubs in different languages. So I'm currently on our account here, the kids account. Let's have a look and see if there's something about dinosaurs. There you go. We'll have Walking with Dinosaurs. And once it starts playing, stop it there so you can hear me. You can choose here your audio and your subtitles. There's not all the languages, and you'll have to do some exploring to find out what's available. But if I go here, then there's it's already got the subtitles, the English subtitles. I turn the subtitles off, but I'll play.
Worms in the ground. And most crucially of all, there's no plants. There's not a speck of green. So the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it's not being absorbed by...
I can change that to Portuguese.
Tem vermes dentro do solo. Mas o mais importante é que não tem plantas. Não se vê nada verde. Sem plantas, o dióxido de carbono do ar não é absorvido.
So there you go. It didn't work very well because the image, for some reason, is not displaying. It's perhaps because I'm recording my screen. But I say it's worth checking out. There's documentaries and other not resources, but there's documentaries and factual programming there, and you have a look and see what's available. There may well be stuff that has overdubs in other languages and subtitles in various different languages as well. And we know from some of the research that's been carried out that watching and reading subtitles can be quite helpful in acquiring language. So that can be watching in the target language but reading subtitles in the home language. Another good resource that we have that's been made available for L1 support is Audible. Now Audible have put together a whole load of free audiobooks for kids. You don't need to have an Audible account. There are hundreds of titles. It's a question of going to the website and starting listening. There's no need to sign up for anything. There's books in English, Italian, French, Dutch, Spanish, German, Portuguese and Japanese. We can have a quick look at those. Over here, like I say, as soon as you get into the site, here are the stories, and listening to them is as simple as clicking on the picture. Here, this is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in, is that Spanish or is it Italian? One of the two, I think.
This
Spanish.
is Audible.
Harry Potter y la Piedra Filosofal de J.K. Rowling. Leído por Carlos Ponce. Una producción de audiolibro realizada por Pottermore Publishing.
So there you go. You can find out what Sorting Hat is in Quidditch is in Italian. So a number of titles there, and a great alternative to screen time. Curl up with somebody reading your book, and we also know how important it is for children to be read books in order to learn about reading and to expand their vocabularies and engage with the cognitive activities of understanding text. So that's another good resource that might well be useful and relatively easy to operationalize if your children have access to the internet. And then I wanted to mention this on our blog site, on the NALDIC blog site, you'll find various competitions that kids can enter. This one I'm particularly pleased to promote because it's a Oxford-based charity, the Stephen Spender Trust, and they do this annual prize for poetry in translation. So this is where the competition is to take a published poem in a language other than English and to translate it into English. There are 14 and under categories, 16 and under, 18 and under, and then an adults category. There's the link, so you can click on that or type that into your browser and that will take you to the website, which gives you all the information. There's cash prize as well, as far as I'm aware. But what I think is really nice about it is it's not just do the translation and submit it. It's do the translation, but then also submit a commentary of no more than 300 words, giving 3 examples of difficult decisions that you had to make when translating the poem and explaining how you overcame them. And that could include something like a word or phrase which presented a challenge to translate, a cultural reference which needed to be adapted in translation, didn't work when it was translated non-idiomatically into English, and then issues with style or form in the original poem. For example, I know that for rhyming verse in English, the rhyme comes at the end of each line. But in Thai poetry, for example, the rhymes don't come at the end. There's a very specific pattern of how rhyming works in Thai poetry, and it's not the same as the way that it tends to work in English poetry. So that's, again, it gives an opportunity for children to engage in first and second language, to build their metacognitive skills by thinking about language itself, and also fun to get involved in and possibly win some money. So that is a very quick sort of jaunt through what we have available on our website, the kind of things that we think that you ought to be thinking about. You will have lots more ideas, but as I say, this is hopefully there to spark some ideas off in you and see what you can find. There's loads and loads of stuff online for us to go and explore, but those are some places that we think you might like to start. Now I want to talk about replacement grades. So in April, a week or so ago, a couple of weeks ago, Ofqual published some guidance on how teachers would generate replacement grades for those children taking GCSEs, AS and A Levels, extended project qualifications and advanced extension awards in maths, who won't be able to take their exams this year. The important sentence or the important passage from the document is this one here, although I do suggest that you read the document in full. But here, we're asking schools and colleges to use their professional experience to make a fair and objective judgment of the grade they believe a student would have achieved had they sat their exams this year. And here I think this is important. It is important that schools and colleges take into account the full range of available evidence when they grade students, including non-exam assessment, the results of any homework assignments or mock exams, and any other records of student performance over the course of a study. I think that's important because we have an opportunity here to reflect the genuine content understanding of the students, which they may have found much more difficult to express under the written conditions of the exam. And here you're being explicitly told to use the full range of available evidence. So those schools that make it routine to assess content knowledge of EAL learners in ways which are friendly, as it were, towards EAL learners are in a very strong position to accurately reflect their children's background knowledge. This might be particularly important for students who are relatively new arrivals, who may well have had lots of education in their first language, which won't be captured necessarily with the English that they have at their disposal. So if you've been keeping good records and giving EAL children opportunities to demonstrate their understanding without needing to rely on the idiomatic and subject-specific academic vocabulary that we would expect of proficient users of English, this is the chance now to demonstrate that or to acknowledge those demonstrations. They do, Ofqual do make a direct reference to EAL learners, which is very nice to see. It's not a given that government documents include any reference to EAL. And again, here is what I think is the important point they make. If you look down to these ones, for students with English as an additional language, schools and colleges should consider the likely language acquisition a student would have made by the time of the exam as part of this and reflect this in their judgment. Now, I think that is very well meant and it's relatively sound, but I think that it is inappropriately focused. We know from the research that's been done by Steve Strand, Anina Hessel, and Ariel Lindhoff at Oxford University that academic language proficiency progresses pretty slowly. It takes, according to their assessments, it takes about 6 years for children to get up to the competent and fluent levels of English proficiency, and that's only 30 or so % of the students who get that. It takes a long time to develop the academic language proficiency needed to access and to demonstrate understanding of the curriculum. So taking into consideration any change in the language proficiency between when schools were closed a couple of months ago, or just over a month and a half ago now, and when the exams would have been taken, which is starting around about now, maybe 2-3 months after the closures, it seems unlikely that much progress would have been made. I mean, progress will be being made, but we know that it's slow progress. So the difference between English proficiency then and now is likely to be negligible. And so it doesn't seem to us to be terribly sensible to be using that as the basis of your judgment and that alone. We think that it's more important to prioritise evidence that demonstrates content understanding, not English proficiency. So when that comes to making the judgment for the replacement grades, we feel that you shouldn't penalise on the basis of non-idiomatic use of English. Indeed, you have an opportunity to, in making your judgments, recognise that content understanding the subjects themselves rather than the English as an object of study, is the important thing here. So what do I mean by that? Well, in some cases you'll be basing your predictions and your replacement grades on events where children have demonstrated understanding with no use of English at all. So, for example, ordering a series of diagrams to show the water cycle, or perhaps using labelling a diagram rather than writing a descriptive paragraph to demonstrate understanding of, I don't know, the parts of a plant, for example. And we also know that receptive knowledge of English or any language comes before productive knowledge. So children are likely to understand more than they can express. And so you're going to be using your the understanding that you've gained about your students through those kinds of activities to say, well, yes, they do know these particular parts of the curriculum. But also that you may have evidence, written evidence, which might be penalised from somebody who's not so well aware of the language, the whole process of language acquisition. And so to illustrate that, here's a sentence that may have maybe the kind of thing that an EAL learner might write if asked a question, presented with a series of objects and asked to say whether they float or sink to make a prediction. And so they could respond, well, after looking at an object, say something like, "It not fall, because it not thick, same water." Now, that's obviously not the kind of academic language that we expect of a highly proficient user of scientific English. But nonetheless, I think that it's fair to say that it demonstrates understanding of the underlying principle that things that are more dense than water sink and things that are less dense than water float. And that's what we're interested in here. Do they know the subject? Not can they demonstrate that understanding in perfect scientific English. We should bear in mind that EAL learners, especially in the lower bands of English proficiency, and thus who may have subject knowledge in their L1 from prior schooling, may understanding more than they can communicate, and you need to use the evidence from your routine assessments and record keeping to inform these judgments. The other part of this document refers to retaking, or not retaking, but taking the GCSEs and A Levels either in autumn or in summer 2021. Again, there are challenges and affordances to this. One of the arguments is that by giving them more time, their academic English will have improved, so taking the exam at a later date might be an advantage. Now, that may be true. Indeed, it may be true of all children. It might not just be EAL children, but all children given an extra few months or an extra year to prepare or learn in advance of an exam may have improved just through the passage of time. But for a number of our EAL learners, we can expect them not to have had good models of English, academic English particularly, while schools have been closed. And for some, that may have resulted in a stagnation or a plateauing of their English language proficiency, or even regression. So it may not be to their advantage to take an exam at a later date if the input in English has not been consistent and hasn't included the models of academic language which they would be getting from school. It also has to consider what has happened, what other things have happened in the life of the learner. So a child or a young adult going from GCSE to A Level will not have studied all of the subjects that they took at GCSE prior to these replacement exams or these kind of resit exams. So it may well be the case that the 13 or so subjects that they took at GCSE, they've gone down to 4 subjects at A Level, and so they haven't had any pedagogical input about those subjects in advance of the exam. So it may not be to their advantage to do it again. However, if they've been studying the same subjects for another year at A Level, they might be in a much better position to do well on the exam, having had more time to study the subject and more time to develop their English. There's also the possibility that they will have left the school and gone into the workforce and may have very different experiences around language between now and when these resits can happen. Of course, this decision really should be with the child or the young person to make, with the guidance and support of the adults in their lives, like their teachers and parents. But in any case, the sort of the get out clause here is that the individual can choose the grade that they want to retain. So the higher of the two, they can take the exam later. If that turns out to be a better grade than the one that they were assigned by their teacher, then they can choose to keep that. If it's not as good, then they keep the one the teacher gave them. So again, that will be a matter for the individual. But it's if you have any role in advising your EAL learners and their parents, then I think it's worth taking into account all of the things that we've said, and I'm sure that you can think of others as well. So thank you very much for listening to that. That's a quick reboot of what we talked last night because the recording didn't happen. I just want you to remember the EALA Journal is a place where you can go for lots of advice on all of this. Here is a post going into more detail about what I've just said about calculating replacement grades, and that takes you through our position and highlights all of the things that I think you need to take into that we should be taking into consideration. And here's that big list of resources. Here are examples of activities you can get involved in. And do feel free to send ideas to me as well. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got an activity you'd like to share, then it's 500 words, nice and easy. Please send it to me and we'll get them published and keep supporting each other. So until the next time, thank you very much for joining the rig. Thank you very much for your attention. Do let us know if there's anything else we can do about it, and we'll see you next time.